A general community discussion about the tool itself, how it serves, and what are the things that might be nice, but the tool is never going to be doing. So this is really the idea. It's like an open conversation. I think all of you probably know Open Data Editor, but just to give you a very, very quick introduction, Open Data Editor is basically a desktop application. Romina will probably show a little bit more about it or tell you a little bit more about it later on. But the idea of this application is basically to give a tool to people that have to work with data every day because, you know, I mean, they are journalists, they're in the public administration, they are activists, for example, or anything that you can think about. There's a lot of people out there that actually work with data every day, despite not having the kind of like technical skills to automatize a lot of like the work with that data. So what these people end up doing is that they spend a lot of time preparing their data sets to be ready to move on then to the part of work that is really interesting for them. So in the case, for example, of journalists or activists, that would be like data analysis, for example. In the case of public administration, it would be like the publication of those data sets. So at a certain moment, you kind of like realize that there was a problem there because that we could help with, basically, like how could we maybe spare that very tedious task for those people and allow them to have time to do the work that they really wanted to do. So what Open Data Editor does is basically it's a desktop application that you can use to detect errors in your table. So if you just ingest a data set into if you just ingest a data set in the application, what the application does is that it will give you a report of all the errors, and so it will help you identify those errors very quickly, giving you a description which will hopefully help you cleaning up also those errors, and then you can move on basically to the part of work that you're really interested in doing. One thing that I might want to mention is that at Open Knowledge Foundation, we have almost 2 decades of experience in working with open data and issues around data portability, data publication, and all of that. But until very recently, we've been mostly working with very technical communities. So in a way, Open Data Editor is a way for us to talk to a whole new audience with all the challenges that that entails in terms of rethinking also the way that we're building this tool, making sure that it serves that kind of audience, making sure that we are not making assumptions, that we're not using language that is too complicated. So basically, this is Open Data Editor in a nutshell. I don't want to take too much of your time, and maybe I'll leave you to Romy, who's the product owner, who will have many more interesting things to tell you. But thanks for being here, and yeah, let's have basically a discussion today. So feel free also to jump on. If you have any questions at any moment, if you want to contribute with, don't wait or just write it in the chat, feel free to really unmute yourself. We really want to have today an honest community discussion with all of you. If you want to tell us, oh, this is really stupid, you shouldn't have done it that way, this is the kind of things that we want to hear today. So yeah, Robbie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for coming. And yes, as Sarah mentioned, we don't only want to have an open session, but also an open conversation in terms of how we are building the tool. Yes, Diogo, do you want to say something?
It's just a short note of opinion following the previous presentation and also yours. My apologies. It's just, and I know this is a lot of work, but to have the idea that the instructions and the community also can be in English, but also in Spanish, in Portuguese, multilingual. And I think this could widen the public, the community, but also the types of ideas, because sometimes when we are speaking in English, we can say something, but in Spanish is another. So it's just this idea of bringing a multilingual, diverse thinking to the community.
Thank you for bringing that up, Diogo, and this is a very, very pertinent point. One of the things that we started thinking about right from the beginning was really to have the application available in multiple languages. So the application at the moment, it's not functioning 100% for everything, but you should be able to use it in 3 other languages than English, so French, Spanish, and Portuguese, and we try to do the same for the documentation. The thing is also like we're a small team as well, and those kind of things will also need, moderation and maintenance as well. So this is kind of like an additional challenge for us as well. But inside the team, the other team at the moment, there's no English native speaker. So there's a lot of conversation already inside the team that is happening in Spanish, for example. A little bit of conversation with Patricio is happening in Italian as well. So, we're trying to tackle this kind of like multilingualism as well. But of course, there's always the challenge. I would say that, again, we're a small team, so there's a small number of languages that we will speak. And, this also means excluding some of the languages that we really have basically like no knowledge of. So, it's a very, very fair point. It's a very difficult thing to address. But Romy, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to this.
Yes, I will start the other way around. Now that we have mentioned the thing with the language, I want to explain something that happened while we were building the tool, which was the discussion around the data validation concept. Because data validation in English is super transparent, and I'm from Argentina. I speak Spanish, and for me, validación de datos says anything to me. So one of the things that we wanted to do together is to, again, reflect on this. And we have different opinions in the team, like people with more expertise on data, they were like, hey, this is transparent, this is clear for users. And we ran a survey. And just one person replied to us like the concept was okay, and the concept was to validate tools and to detect errors in tables. So we changed that concept to detect errors in tables, which is a plain language, again, clean, transparent for non-technical users. But these kind of discussions that you have like raised here at the beginning of the session is one of the discussions that we also have when we started this having conversations around the language that we were using in the tool. Also, not only from the technical point of view, because sometimes what we do is start thinking about, okay, this is code, how developers extrapolate the code to the tools that they are building, but also to think about, okay, how we can, again, communicate this in a different way. Having said that, what I want to start with is to tell a little bit about the work that we are doing with the Open Data Editor. When we started in 2024, the tool had too many features. We started talking to users to understand what users do when working with data. And what we discovered there is that people spend, as Sarah mentioned, like too much time focusing on trying to detect errors in tables. So we start removing features from the application, say, okay, we need to focus that into a tool to make users easier to detect errors in tables. We knew that there were a couple of apps that were in the data ecosystem, like OpenRefine, for example, but what we also knew is that OpenRefine, which is also it's also so for non-technical users, it was for technical people. So we, again, started thinking around, okay, how we can make this tool work better for non-technical users. I'll share my screen right now to talk a little bit about what the ODE does. Can you see my screen? Yes. Yep. Okay, as we explained, the Open Data Editor is a desktop app to help non-technical data practitioners to explore and detect errors in tables. This is a very simple mission. What we did is, okay, we could do like a lot of things with the app. What is the one thing that we want to focus on to build a great product to try to solve a specific problem from our communities? Before we start, if you haven't downloaded the Open Data Editor, you can scan this code and you will be redirected to the Open Knowledge website where you can download the app. There are different versions according to your operating system. So we have one, of course, button for Mac, other for Windows, other for Linux. So you can download the app there. What Open Data Editor does? The tool basically provides a general overview of all errors in our tables. I will show you how the tool works in a couple of minutes, but basically what you can do is ingest your CSV or Excel files, even Google Sheets, and the ODE, what it does is basically it has a couple of
rules working in the background, and those rules are applied to your data to try to detect the errors that you have in your tables. This is a very simple process in the sense that you ingest your file and you will see the errors in just a couple of seconds. We also try to work on the errors report because since the ODE uses a toolkit called Frictionless, the rules are written for coders or developers or people with technical skills. So again, we have a lot of conversations around errors to try to explain them in a simple way for non-technical users, but the ODE also provides an errors report so that people have a kind of overview of all the problems that they have in their data. And also, I mean, we think this is super useful in the sense that when you see what are the problems and the description of your problems, maybe when you work with your data outside the app and you ingest the data a second time, you are more likely to perceive like the errors that your data had at the beginning. So this also enhances the capacity of the users to detect errors without using the tool. It's like literacy on data problems, basically. And the tool has basic editing functionalities, but it allows users to correct errors in the tables. Or if they don't want to do this, but you're working with a colleague in your job, what you can do is download the file with the errors. That's what we are working right now and what I'll show you in this session, like a special preview here. And you can use other softwares where to clean the data from your table. Why did we do this? I mean, basically, again, when we started talking to users, some people mentioned that although they have this kind of overview of the problems in the tables while using the ODE, they wanted to use Excel or Google Sheet to clean that data. So we decided that, I mean, changing the system basically, it was not in our hands in the sense that we are not Microsoft. We don't have the resources that Microsoft have. So if we only focus on detecting errors in tables and then users download the data and clean the data outside the applications, it was okay for us. Let's see the ODE in action. But before that, do you have any questions regarding the ODE? And sorry for Pato, Sarah, and Lucas that I know that you heard this like 100 times.
We love it every time.
Do you have questions? No? Okay. I'll share my screen again just to show you the tool.
Maybe, Romy, it's not really a question, but someone put an interesting comment in the chat, which is whether we plan to release a mobile version for low resource communities where maybe there's little access to computers.
Interesting question, because we also got the same question, I think, a couple of days ago. The problem is that, I mean, tables are complex if you want to see them on phones. We are not planning to work on a mobile app for phones, and the thing is that from the very beginning, we thought about the ODE as an app for your laptop, but maybe Pato can add more on this.
Yeah, no, we don't have like plans to mobile. I think that we could, like in the future, if there is like a lot of interest, but so far in like short-term roadmap, there isn't. Although I'm like super interested in know a little bit more of the use case. What are the people challenged in those scenarios? How they access their data? How would the user want to process it? What challenges do we have with the current applications and experiences? So, I mean, long story short, we don't have plans, but we are interested in getting this feedback and understanding these necessities.
Mohammed?
Yes, please, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so I just wanted to clarify the use case for this mobile app version. So just like the Google Sheet mobile app, it allows you to still have access to the tables and all of that, and also you with the version. Of course, there are a lot of limitations when you're using the mobile app, but in our parts of the world, especially in Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of people use mobile phones for data collection in the field, and most of these people are students or just graduates. So some of them do not really have access to laptops or computers, and so they will want to be able to find ways of doing this cleanup. So not now, but maybe hopefully in the future, if a mobile version where most of these the scheme, the data types and all of that would be set, and the person can just be able to detect these errors right using a mobile app. This is a future projection. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, Pato, sorry, you wanted to say something? No? Okay. Okay, let me share my screen again. I will show you the tool in action right now. Can you see my screen? I stopped seeing you, so perfect.
Yes.
So this is the main screen of the Open Data Editor. We work a lot to make it clean in the sense that it's easier for users to understand what they have to do without reading the user guide, because that was one of the challenges that we found when we started working in this application. We prepared a nice user guide for everyone to go there, visit, try to understand what the tool does, but at the same time we discovered that people didn't read user guides. So for us, one of the main challenges was how to make this self-explained and clear for people so that they can ingest data in an easy way. So you will see that we have two buttons here. This means that you can click here or here to ingest your data. When you click here, you will see this dialog. And here, what you can do is basically add local files. This means that you can add Excel files or CSV, but also folders. And what we think about this, I mean, when we introduced the folder feature, was because we knew people from the open data community that when they started working on projects, they sometimes put Excel files in one folder to make them simpler to work with. So we decided to add this feature. And then add external data. It is for users. I will show you an example, but to ingest data from Google Sheets, because again, from our user research, people mentioned that although some of them use Excel, when they work collaboratively, they use Google Sheets. So we decided to also keep this feature that was in the original version to also allow the users to ingest data from basically Google Drive. So let's go back to add local files. I click on select and I'll ingest a CSV. This is from the Open Data portal from Barcelona. Did you see that? Basically, very simple. I mean, just two actions and the OE read the file. And what we see at the top is that we are now positioning on the data grid, a component of the application. Then we have the errors report panel, and this is not activated. This means that the ODE hasn't detected errors in these files according to the rules that we are using. And then also people can click here to check the source code. The source code is basically another way of seeing your table. And when you have errors, and this is a conversation that we have with Patricia, it's easier for people to see what is not working in your file when looking at the file in this way. So let's go back to data here. In this case, we have no errors, and I want to show you what you can do from the data grid. And this is an addition that we incorporated, I think, less than a month ago. So you will see that we have this icon next to the column names. If you click here, you will see this dialog. Here, what you can do is change the name of your the column name. For instance, let's change it to data. What we see is that the expected data for that column are dates. You can also write a description here. For instance, let's say that you're working with COVID data sets and you want to say, hey, this is the date when the person got infected, or this is the date when the hospital recorded the infection or something like that. You can add comments here. And let's go back to the language wording and discussions around and conversations around language, because this was a category the flag empty cells as error, it was on the metadata part of the application in the old version. What does this mean? That basically people could tell the tool if empty cells in one specific comments should be detected as errors. But the language was different. There was just one word, very complicated, and we were like, okay, how we can make this transparent for user? And we decided to use a question. Flag empty cells as errors? Let's select yes. So in the case that I have empty cells in this column, the ODE will flag them in red to show that my file has errors. Let's click on save. In this case, I don't have empty cells. How do I know that? Because the errors report panel is still inactive, and I change the name of my column. What happens if I ingest a different data set? Let's go back to select. Let's select this one. Can anyone say what happened here very quickly? What are the red rows? And what are you seeing here? Don't be shy. Omar, I know that Omar is there or someone else. Please go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So in this example, the common mistake that we can see over here, there are blank spaces. So you have to establish, for example, in the workshops that I taught before with the Open Data Editor tool, we try to contrast this this table that you're displaying on the tool with the original one. So we try to establish a difference between what the original source is trying to say to us, and we try to watch if there's if there is a mistake or not. So that's the way we try to share with the people what the Open Data Editor tool can do for them. But I don't know if I'm right or if I'm wrong.
No, right answer. And also I want to add one more thing. So this is a data set that comes from the Argentinian Open Data. So what we are seeing here is that the file has errors. The original file that was put by the government in the Open Data portal from its origin. Basically, we have empty rows here, and if we click here on the errors report, the ODE shows the user in which rows the problem is located. So again, for non-technical users, and if you want to have an overview of the problems of your data, by ingesting this and just in a couple of seconds, you can see what is the main issue in your data. Let's check another data set. Let's click on select. I will select this one. Then, okay, again, what are we seeing here? We just did a third data set. The errors report highlights that we have 30 errors. I click here, and here the ODE mentions that we have a duplicate label. The duplicate label is when one of the column names is duplicated in our table. So we can scroll here, and what we see is that we have enero, febrero, marzo, abril, and we have enero, febrero, marzo, and abril here. So again, when looking at this, the user can see that something is not working and that you need to change or edit your data. And then, as in the previous case, what we have are empty rows, 6 empty rows, and the application tells you where those rows are located, in row 86, 87, 8, and blah, blah, blah. So again, you can ingest like several types of data. What I want to show you right now is how to ingest a Google Sheet, because this is one of the questions that we get a lot.
Romina.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to seek clarity because then I think it's a question that I've been raising for my past reports.
Yes.
Because then I'm seeing that when you ingest the data right now, it quickly shows the errors. But in my case, I had to go to each column section and press on and click on the 3 lines where I have to prompt it to select the type of errors. But I'm seeing here it automatically detects errors. But in my case, it doesn't automatically do that. I have to go to those to actually define the errors. And
No,
then it shows.
I think what you are referring to is that because you are mentioning the last version of the tool where we added these components into the column name. What you are referring to is to the detect empty cells as errors. That is a specific type of error from files that by default having empty cells in your data is not a problem. Because maybe again, let's say that you're working with health data and you have no records for a specific year, that the fact that the cell is empty, that doesn't mean it's a mistake. Basically, people didn't get the records for that year. So what you're referring to is the fact that in your case, maybe you wanted to detect empty cells as errors. So what you need to do is to go to each of the columns and preset that. And that is correct. Yes, right now, there's no automatic function to do this basically in a quick way. You have to go to each of the column names and select that part and then click on save so that the validation process runs again and detects the errors in your data. That's correct.
I thought also, yes, maybe just if I can recommend, I don't know. I thought also if it's possible that when the AI element comes into play, we can put prompts to say detect so and so or consider this as an error. Then the AI element or the AI component does the job. I don't know if it makes sense.
Sorry, question about that. So you mean that we can like generate a prompt to detect empty cells by default as errors without clicking on this feature, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Pato, sorry, you wanted to add something?
Yes, I wanted to add more context regarding like the errors detection. So you to like understand what happens behind the scenes. Basically, the open data editor has two challenges. The first one is identify what type is the column, which seems like trivial, but it's not that trivial in software engineer to say, okay, this column is a number, or this column is an integer, or this column is a date, or this column is a text. It's not quite simple. It's a challenge, but we have implemented an algorithm in the library that is frictionless to automatically detect. So that's one of the challenges. And the second challenge is to define what is an error. So in the case that Romina mentioned, like an empty cell, is that an error or is not that an error? That thing depends on the context of the person that creates the data set. In some contexts, an empty error is an empty cell is an error, or a no value is an error. In others, no. So that's why sometimes like the application can maybe detect something as an error and other times cannot detect something as an error. If that happens, or if you are like thinking, this should have been flagged as an error, but it didn't, I would suggest two things. Well, first, we have like this flag empty else as errors to flag that. And second, check if the application correctly detects the data type of your column. For example, another use case. Some data set has the numbers, and when they have decimals, they have 1, 2, and others write 1.2. So if you have a column which says like, I don't know, price, the price of an item, and you have written in that column, in some columns 1.2 and in others columns 1.2, maybe like the open data editor is going to think that that column is not a number, it's a text. So then when you go and specifically say, hey, no, this is a number and should be a number, then the open data editor revalidates with the information. So the more feedback and the more customization you do to the columns of the open data editor, more accurate is going to be the error detection that the application is going to have.
Okay, this is interesting. So it's more like, in a way, it will pick the algorithm and it's more like a training session and of some sort?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a training session. Training is like a heavy word for like the software engineering because it involves like artificial intelligence and stuff. It's just a matter of a basic algorithm. It tries to grab like the most amount of data it can and run a couple of tests on that data and say, okay, if I try to like cast it as a number, if it fails, then it's not a number. So it's like a basic algorithm in the most simple way of an algorithm. We have like some predefined steps and tests that we apply to a sample of the data of those columns, and based on the result of those tests, we define which is the type of the data. And sometimes can be flawed. It is quite good, but yeah, sometimes can happen that is error or doesn't detect correctly.
Okay, so just a big takeaway that we can also maybe include probably in our reports, or I think for the public and the users also, is that it's not always when when you ingest the data and it doesn't show errors, it doesn't necessarily mean that there are no errors. You need also to be sure before you conclude, you make a conclusion.
Exactly, and I want to add one more thing to what Pato mentioned. Also, because we are using frictionless. I mean, you don't need to like remember the name frictionless, but what this means is that we are using a particular set of rules to detect errors, and those rules are limited. I mean, these are the rules that comes from a specific framework. So we will always be looking at problems based on this framework, and maybe I don't know. We have a couple of organizations that have reported that they know that they see that in one cell they have text, long text, and that shouldn't be there. Okay, that is not the framework that is going to detect that problem in your data set. So again, problems and error detection are connected to a specific rules.
Precious, do you want to go next? I think you had your hand raised.
Yes, I do. You see, coming from a software development angle, I understand what Patricia is trying to explain. Detecting errors, especially from on a general data set, you require a whole lot of information before you can zero in on particular sets of error. Maybe with time we could still clean up that angle so that it will be a little bit more intuitive for non-technical users. Because if they have to start specifying rules before they get the error message, we're making it a little bit technical, and that is exactly what we're trying to avoid. So that now affects my next question, and that is how you deal with errors involving dates, because that is one very terrible data type that, it's a nightmare for programmers. So how does the ODE take, for instance, now I'm dealing with data that require a particular age bracket. How does the ODE handle such situations? Because it's actually an error if someone outside that age bracket is captured in the data set. So how does the ODE figure that out?
Yeah, currently, it will detect an error if it doesn't follow the ISO 9901 format, which is like the standard format for that you write the date in the year, month, date, hour, minutes, seconds style. In the previous version, we had the possibility to put like a mask for, okay, this date should have been written in this form, and if it is done in this form, it should be flagged as an error. Of course, 90% of people say, like, what is this? I don't understand. How they don't even know that exists or that is a problem. I think something that we can maybe improve in the current experience. Okay, if I select a date, what is the expected form of the date field? I think it's good to clarify that. So thanks for the feedback. Currently, if it doesn't fit like the format, the frictionless defined in the standard, which is that this ISO, is going to flag it as an error, which is not an error per se, which is funny, but yeah.
Okay. Well, it makes sense. It makes sense. The other aspect, which I think might be a little bit tricky, is the date range problem. So, for instance, I just want my data set to capture above 18-year-olds. You get. So, is there any algorithm in the ODE that can handle that kind of scenario?
Not currently, but it's something that we can add, and it shouldn't be like that difficult, because now we have for like the strings to have like a max length, minimum length. We're gonna have for like the integers as well to have like a maximum value and a minimum value. So what we can do is also to put like, okay, if this is a date, and you can put like a range. Okay, I want this date to be between this value, and flag all the dates outside of this range as an error. That could be like a possible solution for this.
Yeah, great. Well done.
I think we have more questions, right?
Yeah, Mohammed, do you want to go next? And then Aurel.
Yeah, I think my question has been asked and answered, so I'm good.
Great. Aurel, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I'm audible.
Yes, you
okay,
are.
on my side, okay, thank you. So on my side is just on there because I've been testing my data using the Excel sheet with like different or multiple like sheets, and what the ODE does is it only reads the first sheet of the data and it ignores the others. So I just wanted to understand if there are any plans to like enhance it so that it can read and validate data across like multiple sheets within the same file. And also just given that many data sets are structured across like multiple sheets for clarity or thematic grouping. So would it be possible for ODE to like allow users to select which sheet they want to like work with?
I can answer that. Yes, and we got that question like many times. Yes, the ODE currently does not allow the user to select the sheet that you want the ODE to read. Sorry, I will mute the screen. Okay, that is not the feature that we have integrated, but we will integrate it soon. I mean, before October. That's the idea. So the idea is that to allow the user to select which sheet the ODE will read after ingesting the data. And what was the second question?
The second question was just around that. I said that given that like many organizations have their like data set like structured across multiple like sheets for thematic grouping. So I just wanted to understand that if it will be possible for AOD to then allow the users to like select which sheet they want to work with, just in a given form of, okay, if it's maybe you have like 2 or 5 different data set in many sheets, then you can then select, okay, in sheet 1, I want to work with sheet 1, I want to work with errors in sheet 1, other than working errors in sheet 2.
I think it was similar to the first question. I mean, correct me if I'm not mistaken, but basically you want to select which sheet you want to work with, right?
Oh, yes, that's correct.
Yes. So that's connected to the implementation of this feature. I mean, the idea is that in the future, whenever you ingest a file, you can tell the ODE which sheet you want to read with the application. But yes, we are aware of that problem, but also, and one more thing, and we know that this thing about having like different sheets is common while working in different organizations, and also it's very common in data sets from the World Bank and multinational organizations. Any other questions?
There's a very nice question in the chat by Jugal about whether Open Data Editor can handle different languages and read different scripts like Arabic, Cyrillic. This is an excellent question, and actually we had this in the first pilot cohort. We had Open Knowledge Nepal, and some of the data sets that they were reading were actually in Nepalese, which uses a different alphabet. So there were some struggles in the beginning, but then it worked. I don't know if Romy or Patricio, you want to add anything to that?
I think Pato can answer that from the technical point of view.
Well, it worked with Nepalese. I think we should do tests with other languages, but I will assume that at least the data grid will be able to displace other languages as well. This is because if it displays the Nepalese one, I assume that it's also going to display the Arabic one. But I want to go back to like the multilingual support, which is like super interesting. It's something that we are like super into it. I mean, we are trying to like ship the application with 4 languages, but at the same time, it's like super difficult to maintain like a multilingual application for the basic reason that the developers that work on the application doesn't know 4 languages, 5 languages, 6 languages. So people can say, hey, can you translate this to Arabic? I mean, I would like to, but how I, as a developer, translate this into Arabic if I don't have any Arabic knowledge? So we need to define like a workflow or a way to work with someone that knows Arabic and can help us like with translation. But at the same time happens that, okay, if we need to have like a quick fix or we need to have like a quick implementation of something that changes the text for some reason, then we need to like contact all the persons that translations to do this. There are tools like Transifex that creates like dashboards online for the community to like do the translations. So it is something interesting. We are trying to like fix it. It's not like a technical complex scenario. I would say that languages that are read from right to left may be like a problem for the application. But on the multilingual, it's more like a workflow problem and knowledge that the team working on the Open Data Editor. The reason why we ship with Spanish, English, French, and Portuguese is because the people in the Open Data Editor team speak those languages. But that's the only reason. I mean, there is no hidden thing there. I mean, someone tried to create a pull request for German, and while we appreciate the contribution, then we say, okay, and who is going to maintain this German language? And how can we create like a workflow that and a way for the application? Well, the application always will default to English if the translation doesn't exist. But yeah, I mean, I want to like be transparent about like, what are the challenges on like the translations schemas. So yeah, and sometimes like working with translation is also tedious because like the technology behind the translations are like quite rustic in software development. So if you change a lot the structure of your code, you need to like rework a lot of your translation files. So yeah, if anyone here has like good experiences on workflows and practices that they apply in other projects to keep like a multilingual project, I'm super happy to like start talking about it because it's a challenge that we are facing and that we would like even more for documentation, because I agree with totally with like the first question that who was that say it? Let me see. I lost the name, but someone at the beginning mentioned what about like the translations and documents and other communities. Totally agree. I would love to have like a web page in Spanish for the Open Data Editor and documentation in Spanish. But yeah, I mean, you need to hire a developer or someone that knows how to translate a website. Anyhow, I think I made the point. If anyone has experiences or practices, happy to like collaborate on this.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that one because you have been challenges with the translations, especially because you're dealing with indigenous communities. And one of the things that we've been thinking about is maybe integrating APIs for languages, but I don't really know how it works. It's just something that we've been thinking about. I don't really know how it works, like integrating APIs for languages with the software. And then it just this question just reminds me of also the element of because then what we're doing is we are cleaning data. We are trying to get the finest of data using the ODE. And I was also thinking of how best can we, because then the idea is to correct the data, how best can we also look into the spelling checks, spelling errors, if it's possible or if it's something that is feasible?
Spelling errors in which language?
No, in this regards, let's just say in the common language that we have been using as a starting point. But I think, of course, with time, the starting point is yeah.
That's a good suggestion, because spelling errors are also like data errors. So we'll keep that in mind. I think maybe I don't know if Qt provides. I think that for some elements and some widgets, Qt provides some kind of spelling detector automatically, like for Qtext edit. But let's create a ticket to me to see, to keep track of these ideas.
One thing that I may add here about spelling mistakes, just as a little provocation, is also that a lot of the error mistakes are generally very Western backed, let's say. So you have a lot of languages that are spoken in many different places, but basically by default, a lot of those checks will be run on how a certain language is spoken in the Western world. So maybe that's also something that we need to take into account when we're thinking about ethical stuff around Open Data Editor.
It's quite interesting because then, for example, what we've been doing, we've been collecting data with AP5 Collect. So it's more like people are using mobile phones, and I'm not in control of what they're inputting in the forms. So I'm dealing with communities. Most of them they're not that much educated. And it becomes also a tenuous activity to come and go through the same data, looking at the spelling errors, because then with cultural data, any spelling error, it's more like it triggers a bias in the data and in what we are trying to communicate. So whilst we are trying to address the biases, we are also facing the risk of building the same biases that we are trying to run away from. So I think if you can look into that, I think it would be amazing. I think.
Okay, I don't know if I can jump on the discussion.
Absolutely.
All right. You see, when it comes to programming, I think for us not to have an open-ended situation whereby will not come to an end when it comes to the programming, I think it's best we approach development using use cases. What I mean by that is, take for instance the issue of language translation. Of course, Tat, let me just call you Tat. I can't pronounce the name well. You mentioned using plugins. Yes, that could work. You can use that to achieve that. But the question is, why do you need to translate from one language to the other? Take for instance, you captured your data in Arabic. What is the use case behind you translating that data to Deutsch? Because it's very likely maybe the data you captured in Arabic is for an Arabic audience, So what we just need to do is that the OD should just recognize the characters you get. So once it can recognize the characters, then it can go ahead and do its error checking and every other thing. In Arabic, presents its results to you in Arabic, and you're good to go. But when it comes to the layout of the website, I think when it comes to navigation and other things, you can use plugins to change the language from one to the other. But in respect to your data set, it could always remain in your language, except you give us a very strong use case that could convince us that I should translate your captured data from the original language to a foreign language. So that is how I see that situation. Then the other one of spell checking, that is an open-ended. In fact, you can never finish that any project when it comes to spell checking. Even in what's it called, AI, which is actually part of my area of specialization. Spell checking, it's a one daredevil environment that people, as in, we lose sleep over spell checks. So I think for a small budget project like the OD now, especially considering the limitation when it comes to the number of hands involved, the best way to handle spell check is instead of allowing your audience to type in the records, you can just give them what's it called, buttons to pick from. And then you supply them with a list of options to select. So instead of them typing, they should rather select. Take for instance, you want to capture their mode of payment. Just get all the list of all the likely mode of payment that you have in that environment. Then put them in radio buttons. Then you let your audience select instead of typing. If there is a method that is not captured in your data collection stuff, you can just include it as other. And as soon as you have such new method that is not captured in your collection approach, you quickly automate it, that the next person filling that form will have that option available to select from. So as much as you can, you restrict people from typing. So instead of typing, they will be selecting. That will go a long way in reducing errors that you get from typing and the rest.
Sorry, I'm jumping in just to add a couple of things. I wanted to mention that, I mean, as for users, for us, it has also been a learning process in terms of, I mean, things that we started discovering when working with the OD. At the beginning, the tool was not clear what it did for users, so we removed features. We then created something to check errors in tables. We started thinking about, okay, how we can translate language from code. We think we solved that, then new problems arise, like things that were defined in the software that we cannot change, like this thing about how to read the data. So I think that's super interesting, but also, I mean, right now, and also I think in this session, it was clear that the ODE checked errors in tables, and it took us 1 year to get to this point, because we kept having user testing sessions and people were like, hey, I want this to clean my data. I want this to do data visualizations. And we're like, no, this is not what the tool does. And we needed to figure out how to communicate that in the tool so it was clear for users. So I wanted to highlight that the journey has been super interesting for us, but also in this thing of thinking about what the tool does. Again, checking errors in tables was not easy at the beginning to get into the stage. And now people know that this is not a data validation tool. You cannot build data visualizations here. You are not going to build graphs in the tool. You are not going to use AI to write articles here. So as soon as we are moving in terms of the product development, we have all these things that you have been talking about. So it's super interesting also to listen to your problems, because that are the things that we want to work on, and that are the same insights that we got from different conversations with potential users. I think we need to wrap up, right?
Exactly. I think we already 1 minute over time. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have this discussion with you. I wish we could go on and on and on, but time is limited, unfortunately, and everyone is busy doing their own stuff. But in case you want to continue the conversation, please email us at any time. We will also be organizing other open sessions around other topics in the future. So stay tuned, and you can definitely join the next conversation. Again, thanks for all the inputs that you gave us. It was a real pleasure. Thanks for spending time with us. If you try Open Data Editor a bit more and you have additional feedback, feel free to let us know, basically. And yeah, have a good rest of the day, everyone. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything.
Yeah, just to say that I've just shared a link with the dates and possible topics of the next conversations. We don't have the registration form yet, but keep an eye on our social networks and channels, and certainly the message will get to you. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. It was great.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great day.
Bye.